Britain is a land of vast green plains, towering cliffs, and endless rains. Due to its geographical location, this island has been in constant interaction with continental Europe throughout history, harboring one of the world's most influential kingdoms. We will discuss how England, as we know it today, came into existence. To begin, we need to travel back to the time when Julius Caesar set foot on the British Isles. Approximately 2078 years ago. The first written records about Britain start to emerge around 55 BC, when Gaius Julius Caesar invaded the island. During this occupation, a people with a culture similar to the Kent tribes Caesar fought in Gaul inhabited the island. Like many other nations, they were labeled as barbarians by the Romans. Although Julius Caesar conducted two separate expeditions to the island, he couldn't establish a lasting Roman rule despite achieving some successes. What Caesar failed to accomplish, Emperor Claudius achieved in the 40s AD. Through campaigns initiated during his reign, the Romans successfully established a permanent governance in Britain, turning the island into one of the provinces of the Roman Empire in a short period. Even though the imperial forces that captured the island faced occasional resistance that escalated at times, they managed to seize a significant portion of the territory. After the general stages of Britain's Roman conquest were completed, many Britons who accepted the new administration began to live peacefully with the Romans. This gave rise to a new Briton-Roman culture. The Britons, now part of the empire, embraced Christianity like many other subjects as the religion spread. The maturation of this process, both in other provinces of the empire and in Britain, extended roughly until the 350s AD. However, this era of peace and Christianization wouldn't be long-lived. A significant problem loomed on the horizon. The empire was under attack from various fronts, particularly the territories in Western Europe were constantly facing invasions and pillaging by Germanic tribes. Rome had entered a period of fragmentation, and pursuing its former conquest policies became impossible. The empire's borders had expanded so much that withdrawal plans from some remote regions, especially in Western Europe, started to be considered. As part of this withdrawal plan, Rome gradually began abandoning Britain from the late 4th century, around the 370s. By the year 410, the number of Roman military personnel on the island had diminished to a few hundred. This collapse led to a profound transformation for the peoples residing in Britain. Over the course of several centuries, the Briton-Roman culture, which had gradually developed and later embraced Christianity, quickly became more isolated and mysterious as it detached from continental Europe. While remaining Christian, the Britons, in many aspects, reverted to their pre-Roman ways. This process of regression turned British history into a dark abyss once again. Understanding the reason for this is not too difficult. The Britons did not share the Roman habit of keeping detailed historical records, so not much has survived from this period to the present day. What we know about this era is largely based on later written sources. Among these records, the writings of Gildas, known as De Excidio et Conquestu Britanniae, On the Ruin and Conquest of Britain, and the work of Bede, a monk, titled Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum, Ecclesiastical History of the English People, particularly stand out. However, it should be noted that the scarcity of records from this period does not pose a serious obstacle to its historical examination. While many things may remain unknown to us, what we do know should be sufficient for a general understanding of the situation. Following the departure of the Romans, many local tribes organized in different settlements and divided the land among themselves. During this period, a significant event occurred that fundamentally changed the cultural structure of the island. the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, originally residing in northern Germany, collectively began expeditions to the British Isles. These expeditions gained serious momentum, especially from the year 449 onwards. There are various theories among historians regarding the reasons for these Anglo-Saxon migrations. Some argue that these Germanic tribes left continental Europe due to famine, while others claim that certain British tribes and their leaders specifically invited them to the island, intending to use them as military force against rival leaders. According to the second theory, the Anglo-Saxons initially came to assist a particular Briton tribe in warfare. However, when they realized the weakness of their hosts, they decided to seize the island for themselves. Considering the fragile state of the British Isles at that time and the periodic challenges in Europe, both of these theories could be valid. Regardless of which theory we accept, it is challenging to say that the overall outcome would have changed significantly. The Anglo-Saxons, who engaged in conflict with the Britons, quickly seized a large part of the island. The Britons had no choice but to escape from the Saxons to preserve their own culture and settle in what is now known as Wales. The Jutes, a minority among them, settled in the Kent region in the Isle of Wight. The Saxons established the Wessex, Sussex, and Essex kingdoms in the southern part of the island. The Angles, on the other hand, conquered the central and northern regions of the island and established the kingdoms of Mercia and Northumbria. The completion of this transition from Roman culture to Anglo-Saxon culture not only had serious historical implications, but also led to a change in the name of the island. While the term Britain continued to be used for the entire island, the southern and central parts of the island, in close contact with continental Europe, began to be referred to as Anglia, meaning the land of the Angles. Over time, Hingulenta evolved into Engleland, which eventually became England. Anglo-Saxon rule cannot be characterized as a well-defined order, especially in its early years. Most of the established kingdoms were not founded through planned and systematic means, but rather based on the conditions prevailing at the time. The reason for this was rooted in the warrior structures of the arriving tribes from around 450 AD. The incoming Anglo-Saxon tribes and leaders, once gaining superiority over the Britons, realized that there was plenty of unoccupied land on the island where they could settle. During this period, we observed the formation of different kingdoms under the control of the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. The acquisition of land and settlement led to the dispersal of the population and power on the island. Each kingdom attempted to establish its own order under its rule to ensure regional security. To compete with each other for territorial control, they needed to sustain this competition, which was only possible if they found allies and soldiers to support them. Payments were made from the war spoils to win the loyalty of these allies and soldiers. This financially challenging situation could not serve as a long-term solution since the spoils could be easily spent. Over time, they began to address this issue from a different perspective. As the borders of the established territories expanded, it became increasingly challenging for tribal leaders to control the conquered lands on their own. Sharing these unoccupied lands among their followers could simplify governance. Consequently, instead of only offering spoils to their supporters, they started granting lands suitable for agriculture and animal husbandry. Different families became landowners based on their proximity to tribal leaders and the support they provided in warfare. This emerging land distribution system necessitated a more organized administration. Thus, tribal leaders transformed into kings, and their supporters, rewarded with land, evolved into lords and barons. After the Anglo-Saxon invasion, the chaos that followed the De Vries seemed to come to an end on the island. Britain started to attract attention from Europe, and Pope Gregory was among those interested in this new order. In 595 AD, he sent a monk named Saint Augustine to Britain. Augustine's mission was to invite the people of the island to Christianity. Besides providing the necessary financial support for this task, the Pope also sent the best monks of the Roman Catholic Church to accompany Augustine. However, initially, Augustine struggled to fulfill his mission. The aggressive attitude towards Christianity exhibited by the people and rulers led to Augustine's perseverance and, ultimately, his return to Rome. However, the Pope was not willing to give up on the island so easily, convincing Augustine to return. In this second attempt, Augustine's efforts began to bear fruit, and Eadbald, the King of Kent, one of the prominent regions on the island, embraced Christianity. The process of religious change initiated by Eadbald's conversion resulted in all other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms converting to Christianity within the next 100 years. This Christianization process had a positive impact on the island. As mentioned earlier, Anglo-Saxon kings and their subjects generally adhered to pagan beliefs, emphasizing that true honor could be attained through warfare and viewing forgiveness of enemies as a sign of weakness. Moreover, since kings believed in different gods, this often led to more frequent conflicts. This kingdom would unite not only the southern part of the island, like during the Mercian period, but all the kingdoms of the island under a single rule without an intermediary king. This kingdom, which would command the respect and flexibility of all Anglo-Saxon peoples, was envisioned to provide a structure where the newly settled Scandinavian invaders could coexist peacefully with the local population. Alfred's idea of this united kingdom, especially involving the Vikings, was quite unusual, as the kings before him believed in fighting the Vikings to the bitter end. In contrast, Alfred argued that such a war would only further exhaust the already weary Anglo-Saxon people and warriors. In the newly planned kingdom, accommodating the Vikings, who had become a reality on the island, had become a necessity. Well, how could he convince these ruthless Scandinavian warriors that his peace-focused plan would work? As mentioned earlier, Alfred was quite skilled at identifying and assessing opportunities that others couldn't see. He was aware that the Vikings had come to the island for suitable lands for wealth and agriculture. He believed that after acquiring sufficient wealth and land, many Vikings would lose their enthusiasm for further warfare. To put this idea into practice, he developed a system he called Dangeld. The word Dana referred to the majority of Viking warriors and was the Old English term for money, coming from the tribute paid by Denmark. The Dangeld system introduced by the young king worked as follows. When Viking raiders entered the borders of the Kingdom of Wessex, the king and other assisting leaders would block their path with the forces they gathered. Instead of engaging in immediate warfare, they offered them money. This offer seemed quite logical to many Viking warriors. After all, the warriors under Alfred's leadership had defeated them before, and they were aware that Anglo-Saxons were not an easy target. The prospect of obtaining at least a portion of the wealth from raiding without losing any men was highly appealing to them. However, problems related to the Danegeld system also emerged. Some Vikings, despite receiving the money, continued to plunder and launch attacks against Anglo-Saxon forces. However, overall, this system prevented Saxon forces from being constantly involved in wars, and it demonstrated that it was possible to establish a peaceful environment among conflicting peoples based on common interests. Alfred had solved a significant portion of the old problems with this system, and showed those around him how the idea of a single and united kingdom could be implemented. Alfred had started his rule with innovative and effective steps. However, some Vikings who received Danegeld payments and continued to plunder posed a significant problem. A group of them launched a sudden raid on Alfred's stronghold in January 878. Some of Alfred's warriors lost their lives in this raid, and others scattered to different parts of the island. Alfred fled from the attack and took refuge in the marshes of Somerset. News began to spread across the country that he had died. At this point, it's not too difficult to understand how hopeless the situation seemed. Just when complete salvation seemed possible after 70 years of hardship, everything was lost again. However, there was something the English did not know. Alfred had managed to survive. In less than a year, Alfred managed to regroup his forces and defeated the Viking forces at the Battle of Edington in 878. Instead of punishing Guthrum, one of the Viking kings, and his men, Alfred chose to forgive them. This decision led to the conversion to Christianity of some Vikings who were tired of war. Between 878 and 886, Alfred continued his struggle against the Vikings who refused peace. In 886, he captured London, one of the most important cities on the island since the Roman era. With the support of his son Edward and Mercian prince Ethelred, Alfred achieved victory after victory against the Vikings. The Vikings, who did not want to fight and wished to live peacefully in the lands they had acquired, were already satisfied with Alfred's attitude. They did not want to fight against their fellow Vikings, but they also did not intend to hinder Alfred's efforts against them. Alfred's strategy had worked, and the Angles and Saxons, thought to be at their end, were gradually reclaiming the territories of England. When Alfred passed away in 899, his determined son Edward ascended to the throne, committed to continuing his father's struggle. Edward's sister, Ethelflaed, was married to Mercian prince Ethelred. After Ethelred's death, Ethelflaed took control of Mercia's governance and joined forces with Edward, effectively uniting the kingdoms of Mercia and Wessex. The two siblings collaborated to reclaim the territories from the Vikings and resist the invaders. With Ethelflaed's death in 921, Edward became the sole ruler of Wessex and Mercia. When Edward passed away in 925, he left his son Athelstan a kingdom of unprecedented magnitude, not seen by any king in England before. When Athelstan was crowned as the king of all English and Saxons, the establishment phase of the Kingdom of England was complete. Alfred's dream had come true, but the English adventure was only just beginning. Until the next video.